So far, they had met with only one obstacle, a large python. They both were on their adventure. They met only one obstacle, that is the large python. But it just raised its blunt hammer-like head. The python raised its blunt hammer-like head, flicked out its forked tongue, quickly shoot out its forked tongue, and slid away to a higher branch and moved away to a higher branch. But halfway up the mountain, a more serious obstacle came their way, a herd of wild elephants. Another serious hurdle came their way when they were in the middle of the mountain. That is, a herd of elephants. Chagin said. Taking care not to make the least noise, they crawled up a little head. They did not make any noise and moved on their knees and hands up a little forward. They could not see the herd. The grey-black hides of the elephants blended too well with the foliage. The grey color of the elephants mixed well with the greenery. But the sounds made by the herd as it fed grew louder. They could hear the sounds made by the herd as it fed increased. Soon it became clear that the elephants had chosen the spot as a feeding ground. They understood that the elephants had selected the spot as a feeding ground, and it seemed as if they might stay on for quite a while, and it looked like as if the elephants might stay there for a pretty long time. There was no question of trying to slip through that herd. There was no chance for them to move easily through that herd. Their path upstream was firmly blocked. The elephants blocked their way. What do we do now, Thenya? Chagin asked. We wait, her brother replied grimly. The children waited. The herd of elephants prevented them from reaching upstream. Chagin asked Thenya what they would do. Thenya replied seriously that they would wait. Apart from the sounds made by the feeding elephants, the jungle was silent. They could hear only the sound made by the feeding elephants. The jungle was silent. The deep hush was broken only twice by the hoo-coo call of a hoolock gibbon. Hoolock gibbon, a gibbon with white eyebrows found in northeastern India, and a pangolin. Pangolin, a mammal with body covered with horny overlapping scales, small head with an elongated snout, means an enlarged nose, a long sticky tongue. The silence was broken twice by a hula gibbon. He gave a call like hoo-coo, and a pangolin was running through small trees and bushes. They waited patiently for over 2 hours. Both of them waited for 2 hours, and then finally they heard heavy bodies crash through the thick foliage. And finally they heard the elephants dashing against through the thick greenery. The elephant herd was on the move. The elephants started moving. When the elephants left the place, their path was clear. They climbed for an hour and all of a sudden stumbled into a clearing. But all of a sudden, they lost their balance and fell into a clear ground. Hundreds of hoof marks were visible on the ground. Hundreds of footmarks were seen on the ground. There were also some pug marks, footprints of animals of wildcats, and imprints of elephant feet, prints of elephant feet. Now all these pug marks, hoof marks were like clues to find the salt lick. Chagun cried out, "It is a natural salt lick." They found that it was a natural salt lick. Wild animals came to lick the earth for salt. To that place, wild animals come to lick salt from earth. This took care of the salt requirement of their bodies. This place took care of the salt requirement of their bodies. The salt spring furrow ran through the center of the clearing for some distance. The salt water holes flowed through the middle of the clear land for some distance and then disappeared and then vanished into a hollow. Hollow means empty space. Thenyak and Chagun raced towards the hollow. They ran towards the hollow. As they had guessed, it was a cave. As they had estimated that it was a cave. The sunlight lit up the interior at the cave's mouth. The sun rays lit up inside the cave. The walls of the tunnel-like cave were coated with white crystals. The walls of the cave covered with white crystals. Crystal, solid substance. Heaps of crystals rose like molehills from the floor. From the ground, piles of crystals rose like molehills. Mole means small mammals. Molehills means a small pile of mud thrown up by a mole burrowing near the surface and dangled like wasps' nest from the ceiling, and from ceiling hung loosely like insects' nests. They saw crystals in large quantity. The pure white crystalline heaps glittered in the slanting rays of the afternoon sun. The white crystalline shone in the sun rays. Thenyak bent down and picked up a pinch of the crystals, put it to the tip of his tongue. "It's salt," he whispered in wonder, as if unable to believe his tongue. Thenyak picked up a pinch of the crystal and put it on the tip of his tongue. It was salt. He spoke softly to himself in surprise and was unable to believe his tongue. Soon he began to hop about wildly in imitation. Imitation means copying of a tribal war dance, whooping and shrieking in gay abandon. "We have found salt," he cried. He began to hop wildly, just like of a tribal war dance, shouted and laughed without a care. He shouted, saying that they had found salt. Chagun crooned, "There's enough salt in this cave to last our village 1,000 years. Chagun sang in a soft voice that there was enough salt in that cave to last their village 1,000 years. That tunnel-like cave is a natural salt mine. The spring flowed through it, carrying some of the salt away," said Chagun. Chagun continued, saying that the tunnel-like cave was a natural salt mine. The spring flowed through it and carried some of the salt away. The sun was already half down on its journey across the horizon. The sun was about to set. The children knew they must hurry back to their village. The children knew that they must go back to their village before it gets dark. Though they wanted to locate the salt spring, they knew this was not the right time. They wanted to locate salt spring, but at the same time they knew that it was not correct. They drank the water in the bamboo tubes. Then they placed the tubes upside down on the ground to dry them completely. They emptied the bamboo tubes by drinking water and upturned it to let it dry completely. They packed the tubes with salt. They filled the tubes with salt. Then, carrying the treasure means salt, upon their backs, they began the descent home. And they carried the treasure on their back and they moved down to their home. The villagers had meanwhile begun worrying. The villagers were worried as both of them did not return back home. When they saw the two children descend, the crowd broke out into loud cheers, and when they saw two of them coming down, they all felt very happy. The children ran excitedly to Grandma Camlong. They ran towards their grandma excitedly. They shouted, "We have found a cave of salt," saying to their grandma that they had found salt cave. Our village will be prosperous again. The village would be prosperous again. Unstrapping the bamboo tubes, they poured the salt onto the earth. They took off the bamboo tubes and poured the salt on the ground. The heaps glowed in the light of the setting sun. The pile of salt glowed in the light of the setting sun. Grandma laughed happily. Seeing salt, she laughed. Well done, children, the chief said. The village chief praised the two children as they have found the salt cave. Your courage deserves to be rewarded. And they have achieved something incredible, so he said that they are worthy to be rewarded. You two will be the chief guests during this Loku festival. He announced that both the children will be the chief guests during the Loku festival. Loku festival, harvest festival celebrated in Arunachal Pradesh. Picking Thanyak up, the chief placed him on his shoulders. As they all got involved in the celebration, the chief lifted Thanyak and placed him on his shoulders. Chegan's father picked her up and placed her on his shoulders. Same with Chegan. Grandma Camlock broke out into a knocked ballet for courage. She started singing knocked ballet for courage. The villagers sang along and began a grand celebration. The villagers sang along with the grandma and they all got involved in a grand celebration. In this way, the two brave children, Thanyak and Chegun, found the salt cave and brought prosperity to their village. They were successful in their attempt.